This works? All right. All right. We are recording tonight's conversation so that we can post it on the Temple's YouTube site and a link to it on the men's group site so that those who cannot join us tonight, we did have a couple people contact us today to ask, can follow it after the meeting. It also means that everything you ask is on the record tonight. So thank you all for joining us. This was a special men's group event. We didn't have this planned far in advance. In fact, we didn't start planning it until this past Wednesday when our guest speaker became available to us. I want to thank Myrna Caden for bringing it to our attention that Professor Gilron was available and interested in speaking with us. The sequence tonight is going to be this. I'm going to give some overall notes about upcoming men's group events. Then I'm going to introduce Yoram Cohen to introduce our guest speaker, and we'll go through questions. Professor Gilron will go through about 15 to 30 minutes conversation discussion. First, we discussed it. It's really going to depend on where his thoughts go as he's talking about it. And then we'll go to questions and answers. At the end of the questions and answers, I invite you all to join us in the social hall for some very light nosh. I don't want to make your supper unappealing. Just light nosh and a chance to carry on the conversation among ourselves. Okay, so with the men's group, we've got a number of events coming up. Next Tuesday, not this Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 7th, we'll be hosting a men's group get-together. No program, it's a chance for us to meet and schmooze for our first meeting of the year. At the end of November, and I better put on my glasses so I can read my own notes. At the end of November, on the 28th of November, we'll be hosting Rabbi Stanley David to speak about reforming religion. It's the topic of one of his newest book. It should be a very interesting conversation, discussion. Come December, on the 19th, we will be having another conversation about Israel. I'm warning you all now, this is just the beginning of this war. I'm hoping that by the middle of December, we will have a better feel and be able to carry on a more detailed conversation. So please, you've come tonight, please plan on joining us again in December for that meeting. In February, complete change of topic, we're going to host our Super Bowl party here at the Temple. That's February 11th, if I have my dates right. In April, Cantor Lani will be putting on a Cantor's concert. We'll have more details for you for that coming up. In May, we're going to host our first Temple Akiba Moth Hour. Now, if you guys don't listen to, hear me out. If you don't listen to NPR, I will tell you, we will have an hour-long show in which members of the congregation will get up and tell stories. They can be funny, They can be serious, they can be sad, but they have to be true. And so if you have a story to tell, or if you know somebody who has a story to tell, please have them get in touch with us. In June, July, August, we will be doing 3 barbecues, 1 each month for the summer. And in July, we will be reprising our summer night under the stars. So a lot of things coming up. If you're not on the temple, on the men's group distribution list, please email us. Please see me in the social hall and give me your email address. And even better, if you're not currently a member of the men's group and want to join, talk to me. Very easy, very simple, and I'll show you how to do it. With that, I want to introduce our what's the right way to say it? Introduce our introducer, and that's Dr. Yoram Cohen, who's a professor of chemical engineering at UCLA, and the former director of the Center of Israel Studies, also at UCLA. And with that, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for really giving us the opportunity to be here and chat with you specifically about what's going on in Israel. And we apologize that it's such a short notice, but we're not in control of the timing and the timeline. So it's unfortunate that that we're going through what is happening right now. We're fortunate to have Professor Gilron visit us, and he'll tell you, more about his visit to the U.S. right now and what's going on in Israel, and about his history. So I'm not going to say much about it, but just to say that I've known Dr. Gilron for many years, and we got to know each other through our work in the area of water and water desalination. And you might say, well, what does that have to do with Israel studies or with anything that has to do with what's going on? And there is a lot, because when you work in the area of water, you're doing it because it's a necessity of life. And when you work in those areas, you end up working with people all around the world. I just came back from Saudi Arabia, several months ago, working with the Saudis in the water area. There are people that are at Ben Gurion University, where Dr. Gilron is from, and where I'm fortunate to be an adjunct faculty, where they have students from the West Bank, students from all around the world, whether they're Muslims or Christians or Jews. And so this has brought us together and trying to really understand what's going on in different places around the world. So we are sort of ambassadors, if you will, of goodwill. So with that, I'm going to turn over, the microphone to Professor Gilron and have him tell us about what's really going on during this dire times in Israel, and uplift our spirits.
Thank you, Yoram. What Yoram neglected to say is that not only are we colleagues, but we're very close friends, both Yoram and Lali and Amy and I. First I'll just tell you about what was the experience of coming from Israel to here. It was on relatively short notice that my son and my wife said, "You need to come and visit for a couple of weeks." So I said, okay. They told me that after I had been 2.5 weeks on Kibbutz Hanaton. Kibbutz Hanaton is a kibbutz on the northern slopes of the Jezreel Valley, about 5 miles west of Nazareth. That's where my daughter lives with her husband and their 3 children. And I was visiting them on Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah on the 7th of October, the Black Sabbath. And I stayed. I didn't go back. I live in Beersheba, but I didn't go back. because my daughter is a physician. She needed to work. My son-in-law is an educator, and he had things that he had to get done. But there was no child care, and there were no schools, because at that point, they weren't set up that if there were a rocket or if there was a terrorist incursion, where would everybody go? Where would they go for shelter? So they said, you know, we can't do this until we get organized. So for the first 2.5 weeks, there was no one taking care of my 3 grandkids unless their parents did it, and they needed to work. So I essentially became the caretaker of my 3 grandkids, which is a silver lining. I mean, at least I find it, you know, it was it was pleasure. You know, it doesn't say that there aren't problems with taking care of 3 little ones, but as some of you know, but no, it was really lovely. They're able to go back to school now because they've gotten everything set up. They know where the bomb shelters are. They're close enough to the child care facilities. They're close enough to the schools. Things have been worked out so that they can do that. Just saying that, you have to ask yourself, what in the world kind of existence is it where those are the considerations that you have to have? So anyway, I got a flight out late Thursday night, essentially Friday morning, 1 in the morning. I get to the airport, Ben Gurion Airport, and everywhere I go, I see that way to the bomb shelter. Everywhere in the airport. You can't go anywhere in the airport without seeing a sign that says, bomb shelter's over here. That's not normal. I go through baggage check, you know, where the security screening where you, in this country, have to take off your shoes. In Israel, we don't do that. We don't mess with that. But, you know, you have the roller, you put your stuff in the tray, and it goes through that little X-ray machine. So I did it, I got through to the other side, and I'm going to pick up my stuff, and there's an air raid siren. And they said to us, leave everything. I wanted to pick up my computer, you know. He said, no, just go into the stairwell there, and you stay there. Went in there, stayed there for the 10 minutes, came back. I still couldn't take my luggage, because the carry-on luggage, because they took everything that had already gone through, and they put it through again. Because during that time, all of that was unattended. If it was unattended, couldn't be relied on. That is the frame of mind, the mental framework in which we are living now. We're living in a condition of heightened vigilance. And that condition of heightened vigilance is a direct consequence of the horror that was perpetrated on us on the 7th of October, and which in many ways continues. I'm going to now take you back about 49 years. 49 years ago, I had just finished college, my bachelor's degree, and it was right after the Yom Kippur War. A lot of my classmates left in the middle of the year. They finished early so they could go and volunteer. I had to finish. I had chemistry sequence that required me to stay to the end. But I volunteered that I would go and teach middle school and high school at Negev. Negev is where, by Kibbutz Gevim, where there was a middle school and high school that served all the kibbutzim of that area. An aside, the middle schoolers ate me up alive, but okay. The middle schoolers ate me up alive. But that's okay. I enjoyed the experience. The kibbutzim that sent their kids to that school were Kibbutz Kfar Aza, Nachal Oz, Mefalsim, Gvar Am, Nirim, the same names that you've been hearing over the last 2.5 weeks. I was teaching those kids. And I don't know which of those families were impacted from the ones that I taught, because it was a long time ago, but I know they were. I have a colleague named Mark Jaffe. He's been working for a number of years with a climate advocacy organization called Extinction Rebellion. It was founded in England, and there's an Israeli branch, and he was working with that. And when that something I decided I wanted to work on, he was my contact person for starting to do that. And I participated in a number of actions with him, and we even did one where we actually got trained on how to do what we were going to do in NVDA, the civil disobedience that we were going to do, and we did the practice at his kibbutz, Kibbutz Kfar Aza. So for the first 2 or 3 days, I didn't know what happened to Mark. In the end, I found out, thankfully, that he was okay. But he's not really okay. He's not really okay because too many of his neighbors and his friends are either dead, or they're either missing, or they're kidnapped. So anyway, Shar HaNegev is this place where I taught. The head of the Shar Negev Council was a man named Ofer Liebstein. And he was always looking for ways to improve the lives of the Palestinians in Gaza. He came up with a scheme. He said, you know what we'll do in terms of energy? We'll put solar panels in, and he set aside some of the lands of the kibbutzim and moshavim in the area of Shar HaNegev, on Israeli territory, that would be able to generate energy that they could then carry into the Gaza Strip so they would have more reliable electricity. He also came up with schemes about, well, we can probably get water in by setting in some pipes that will run along the strip that we can then get the water in from there. The pipes that he helped get set up and run through the strip were dug up by Hamas. They chopped them up into convenient lengths that could then be turned into rockets. They were more interested in having rockets that they could fire at us than they were at providing water for their own residents. On the 7th of October, when I don't remember if he was at Be'eri or one of the other kibbutzim, but he was at one of the kibbutzim, and the Hamas terrorists infiltrated that kibbutz. He heard shooting, and he went out with his service weapon, revolver, to try to defend and take care of his family and friends and protect them. He died trying to do that. Also his mother's wife and niece, her nephew, and his son. This is a man who is looking for ways to help his neighbors. Israel has allowed the Red Cross and others to bring in humanitarian aid to Gazans on the southern end of Gaza. They told the Gazans to move to the south so they would be away from the areas of fighting. And they've supplied water to the Gazans, including an extra pipeline that has just been put in. The Hamas will not give the Red Cross access to the 239 of our citizens and those of other countries that they are presently holding hostage. They prevented Azatis from fleeing. They took the keys from their cars. This was reported. They've hoarded fuel that's meant for hospitals for the Azatis. The hospital that was blown up, that gullible media or lazy media did not check on and initially reported it as being the work of an Israeli airstrike, was later shown to have been the result of a misfired Islamic Jihad rocket that hit an ammunition dump that they had put close to the hospital. And it was the explosion of that ammunition dump that caused the hundreds of Palestinian casualties. There have been another 550 misfired rockets that have landed within Gaza. And they put their command center under the main Gaza hospital, based on intelligence that Israel has gotten from the Hamas operatives that have been caught and questioned, as well as other electronic evidence that they have. Hamas is a modern incarnation of Amalek. Those of you who remember the passage in the Bible. Amalek was the people that, when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt, and they were trying to go to where Moses had set up a spring that God had told him to hit the rock so that the water would come out of the spring, and the people were going to the spring. And the Amalekites attacked not the Israelite soldiers. They attacked the stragglers, the weak, the tired, the exhausted. And the text says, Velo yirei Elohim. Velo yirei Elohim literally translates as, they did not fear God. But the colloquial understanding of that throughout the Tanakh, this expression does not mean, it's not a theological statement. It's a statement about, does this person have a sense of basic human decency? Amalek v'lo yirei Elohim. Hamas v'lo yirei Elohim. Despite they cloak what they do in the name of God, it is a total absence of God that leads them to do what they do. And it is desecration of God, the name of God, that they would use God's name to justify their horrible and heinous actions. The Bible says that such a people that engages in such a practice, they need to be wiped out. What needs to be wiped out is the practice, the attitude that allows such things to happen. And we're put in a position where that is what we have to do today. We're not talking about the civilians. We're talking about Hamas. And when Hamas tries to cynically use their own citizens as stage props, they treat their own citizens as objects and fuel for their own propaganda machine. None of us must allow them to get away with it. They don't care any more about their citizens than they do about us. They just care about their You hear me? Can you hear me now? Yeah, it went back. Okay. Is this better? Okay, so this one works, I can tell. Okay, so a distinction must be made. There is the Gaza population, the Azadi population, which Israel has already said, move away from the area of conflict, go to the south. And then there's Hamas. We have to recognize we made a mistake thinking we could tolerate having an organization like Hamas on our doorstep. An organization whose charter, which they have never renounced, calls for the obliteration of Israel, and which sees no other solution than that Jews should be gone from the region. We didn't take them seriously enough. We take them seriously now. And when people talk about ceasefires and when people talk about, well, we can renegotiate things, no. When someone has shown you by words and deeds that they will settle for nothing less than your destruction, you have no choice but to get rid of them first. And this is what we're facing. That's one part of the story. The second part of the story that I want to tell is a less dark story, a more hopeful story. And that is that while on one hand, this terrible attack has generated within us the fierce resolve to push this threat away from us for good, it has also initiated or resulted in an incredible coming together of Israeli society. All walks of life, people from all different groups who have come together to help each other to get through this and to do what needs to be done to get on with life, defeat the threats, but most importantly, take care of each other, be an enlarged national community for each other. And I'll give us a couple of examples. On the day of the attack, there was this nature party going on, I guess what you would call a rave here in this country. And there were hundreds and hundreds of participants, maybe even more, who were at an open field in Kibbutz Re'im. There was a driver from Rahat, which is a Bedouin community north of Beersheba. I've been there a number of times. And he had brought these people in the day before to participate in the party. He got an urgent phone call saying, "We need to get out of here. Can you come get us?" And he said, "I brought you in. I've got to bring you back out." He gets there, and there are bullets flying everywhere. And one of the other people that came in with him said, "Let's get out of here. This is dangerous." He says, "I can't. These are the people I brought in. I've got to bring them back out." He went in under the gunfire. He got the 30 people he had brought in back out again. On his way back out again, he picked up another wounded Israeli woman and got her out as well. He saved 31 people's lives. He's my fellow citizen. He's my fellow citizen of the State of Israel. There have been many Arab residents of many of the towns in Israel that have contributed food, packages, clothing, everything that the evacuated people need, and have from the get-go been doing this. The head of the Islamic Party that was in the previous government's coalition, not the present one, the previous government, Mansour Abbas, the first day came out with a severe condemnation of the behavior of Hamas and the attack that they had done. You talk to most Israelis, Israeli Arabs, and they are appalled. There was a call for blood, obviously for blood donations because they were going to need them. Within 2 days, they said, "We have everything we need. Please, we can't take any more." 2,000 ultra-Orthodox young men have now volunteered to go into the army, realizing they can't sit on the side. The impulse of almost all Israelis now is, what can I do? There's an organization which is now in this country called Brothers and Sisters in Arms. Let me just double check that. Right. And they were called Achim LaNeshek, Brothers in Arms. And they were one of the leading organizations of the protest against the present government's attempt to perform a judicial coup. On a dime, that day, on the 7th of October, they switched the diskette. They took their considerable organizing and initiative skills, and they put it to doing the matchmaking that needed to be done of getting supplies to where they were needed, both for civilians and for the military. I should mention that of 350,000 of our reservists have been called up. This is a full call-up. An example of what they've done so far. They've identified over 12,500 offers to host Israelis displaced persons from the south and the north of Israel. They've gathered and distributed between 30 and 40 tons of food and water to those in need. They've provided more than 200,000 cooked meals for soldiers and civilians. And in direct cooperation with the IDF, they've provided tens of thousands of tactical vests and other non-tactical equipment for soldiers. They've included gathering and distributing items such as 40,000 pairs of socks, 20,000 watches, 4,000 sleeping bags, 30,000 phone chargers, to name a few. Also, they provided medical kits, including 18,000 pieces of medical devices. On a personal note, My daughter Miriam is a family physician, and she's been busy getting equipment so they can have an emergency medical center on her kibbutz Hanaton in case it gets attacked by rockets or terrorists. Another doctor named Michal is helping. Michal told me about the efforts to get the medical equipment, which was sorely lacking in quantity for both the army and civilians. One of the things they needed were tourniquets that can be self-applied because they were in short supply. Also, they needed to buy self-healing gauze for treating large apertures to the abdomen. She had her husband, who was presently in New Jersey with the kids, go to an Army-Navy store there, where he located a bunch of this equipment. And then he gave it to an El Al pilot who was friends with the family on the kibbutz. They had that equipment in Israel within 48 hours. This is called organizing from the ground up. It's called using all of your networks. It's called what do I know, or what do I have, or what I can do that will help fill in the needs of what the people are. A final example. As Yoram told you, I'm a researcher in desalination. I'm one of the members of the Israel Desalination Society. I'm on their steering committee, and we have a WhatsApp group. So one of the things that came on through the WhatsApp group was, well, we have so many soldiers now that are, hundreds of thousands of soldiers that are now deployed either in the north to deter Hezbollah or in the south for the push that will now be done against Hamas. And they don't all have water. What are we going to do? Can somebody get us some, 250 liter or 500 liter tanks to get the water? Within less than 2 days, the head of operations of the Sorek desalination plant, which is the largest desalination plant in Israel, also one of the world's largest desalination plants for seawater, he'd already had his crew get up all the containers, fill them up from the desalination plant, and get it shipped out to where they were needed. That's called using your networks. It's called we're all in this together. And that brings me to my final point. What can you do? There's a lot you can do in many, many ways. You're also part of the network. Obviously, donations are greatly appreciated, both for buying the prosaic things, diapers, clothes for kids, clothes for adults, because we have 200,000 people who have been displaced because the army told us we had to get everybody out from the first 5 kilometers south of the northern border to protect in case Hezbollah starts something, and we had to evacuate all the people from the envelope of Gaza, Otef Gaza. Those people left often with very little. If they had, because they were where the things were attacked, or they just had to leave in short order. Another example on the contribution end, my synagogue in Beersheba has 7 childcare facilities, childcare for kids. The civil defense authorities told us, unless there is a bomb shelter directly attached to that, you cannot run that facility, or you can't run that class, because you have to be able to get those kids, and some of those kids are 6 months or a year old. They can't take themselves. You have to carry them in. So they completely rearranged the entire synagogue so that every single space that had a bomb shelter had a child care facility right next to it. They moved the office because the office had one of the bomb shelters in there, so that can't be there. The child care facility has to be there. But we were left with one of our child care facilities, which was without a bomb shelter. So a contractor came up and says, look, by the way, they cut all the red tape. Now you can almost get immediate approval for a bomb shelter. You don't have to go through all the approvals. So he said, I can build it for you. I can have it ready for you, within 3 days. The only problem is it costs 150,000 shekels. So not everybody can just pull that out of their pocket. So that's an example. But that's an example just because I personally know it. But multiply that by many other examples. Most of the residents of Ashkelon do not have bomb shelters. Ashkelon is this. Ashkelon, okay. Expressions of support to soldiers in the field mean a lot. A lot of kids in Israel are writing letters to the soldiers, but also if kids write letters to the children of evacuated families, that can mean a lot. You can give your time based on your profession. Psychologists are badly needed, even to be available on Zoom. Social media experts who can push back against Hamas propaganda and shut down fake news quickly before it can spread. These are badly needed skills. Take advantage of your network and existing activities. As I've told you, I'm an environmental and climate activist as well as my research. And when Greta Thunberg came out with her shallow support Palestine post that could be misconstrued as support for Hamas, within a day, other activists and I framed an open letter explaining the damage that she was doing both to addressing climate crisis effort and the Palestinians themselves. Those who wish to go to Israel now, who feel they can do so, we have a real gap in the number of people that are available for farmers to pick their crops and tend their livestock. The foreign workers have all left because of the security situation. Many of the farmers and the people in the farm communities have been called up. So these farm communities, these farm operations, some of them will be in danger of economic collapse if there aren't additional hands to help. By the way, some of the more responsible political figures in Israel from the past years have shown a personal example. For example, Bughi Ya'alon went down and to one of the dairies to help because he was a kibbutz member in the Arava. He went to help do that. There have been others that have done the same. Most importantly, everyone needs to advocate. Become well informed. Speak out. Do not let lies and half-truths go unchallenged. Do not let Hamas wrap itself in victimhood while reveling in its utter brutality and cold-blooded cynicism. As Rabbi Matt Futterman said, who's a longtime resident of Ashkelon, he quoted Churchill in his Times of Israel op-ed today, quote, "Truth is incontrovertible. Ignorance can deride it. Panic may resent it. Malice may destroy it. But it's always there. We have to make sure that the truth gets out and that it's heard and is not drowned out." Thank you.
All right, we now have time for questions and answers. I will carry the microphone over to you to ask the question. Again, we are recording this, so it's important that everything be going over the microphone. All right, you had your hand raised first. Let me come to you.
Hello. First, I want to ask, donate to who? Can you give a specific, you mentioned.
The organization that I mentioned before, Brothers and Sisters in Arms, they have a website, in both in U.S. currency and in Israeli currency. They now also have tax-exempt status.
Okay.
I can, whoever is the contact person, okay, so I will send her a list. I have a list of places where donations can be made.
Okay.
In addition, on the information side, some of you might be familiar, but for those who aren't, I will give a list of English language websites where you can follow the news that's going and get accurate information.
Okay, that was just a general. Could I ask one more question? I have relatives that post on social media how they stand, they'll condemn what Hamas did and how they stand in support of the Palestinian people. And there's all this talk about a ceasefire, the UN passed by a majority vote. I haven't heard anything from those people as to what they suggest Israel should do in response.
I would
Is there
put it on a very personal basis. I would put on the basis of if an organization in Nevada fired rockets at residents of San Francisco or Los Angeles and sent in a squad that murdered 10,000 people, because if you talk about the proportional number, it's at least that many. How would you feel about a ceasefire? What do you think you should do to stop the threat? You think you should negotiate with the folks from Nevada? Make it personal. Make them put themselves in the place of the Israelis that are dealing with this right now. And do not allow them to wiggle out of it. Ask them, what would you do if you were in my place?
Thank you. So I'm wondering why Israel, at the United Nations, has some very compelling facts that have not been in the newspaper, such as Hamas
That's why we need people like you to say the things that you just did. And that's what I'm asking of all of you, to do just that. With your colleagues, with your acquaintances, if you're online in social media presences, you need to respond and push back. The other thing I will say is that, but I won't go into over much detail because I don't think this should deflect from the main effort. Much of what's happening right now in terms of the magnificent response of my countrymen and my society in Israel is happening despite the present government, not because of it. So because of that, and it's in every aspect of how the government functions, we know that there's going to be much to repair also on our side once this is over. Certainly in terms of our political system. But right now, we have to do what we have to do. So just like Brothers in Arms didn't wait for the the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of the Economic thing to do things, it just went ahead and did. We have to do the same thing in the explanation and advocacy for Israel's position. We can't wait for various government ministers or political appointees to do what they should be doing, because if they were going to do it, they would have done it already. In Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of Fathers, it says, "B'makom she'ein ish, hishtadel liot ish." In a place where there are people who are not responsible, you yourself have to act as a responsible human being. And that's the obligation on all of us.
Can I give you a different mic, just because I think that that one's not working?
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
I was surprised to find out that Israel was supplying Gaza for all these years water, electricity, and who knows what else, and they're bombing us. What does it take for a country, a state like Gaza, to do their own water and their own electricity, right, and not like be their own a real country? What does it take to do that?
What it takes is to get rid of the victim mentality that says, I'm a victim, and therefore everything I deserve, and therefore anything I do, no matter how bad it is, I'm excused for taking responsibility because I'm a victim. Until the majority of the Azati population rejects the victim mentality and starts asking the question, how can I help myself? Until they start asking that question, it can't change.
I'm not surprised that they didn't do it, but it's like, where's the common sense? They're bombing Israel and they're taking their water, and didn't they think that we're going to stop the water? And they don't.
Because they were planning on
Annihilating.
a number of things. The international community being infinitely gullible, the international community being infinitely manipulable. I mean, any other country would have long ago put an absolute blockade on Gaza. The thing that's outrageous is we're accused of blockading Gaza when we didn't. And maybe we should have, because if we had said, no water, no fuel, no nothing unless you stop throwing rockets, maybe the rockets would have stopped a long time ago. But the indulgence of the international community, they have a certain responsibility. The attempts of Hamas to manipulate the international press, international aid organizations, has to be stopped.
Thank you.
Netanyahu said this is going to be a long war. A long war is going to mean casualties, heavy casualties on both sides. I don't know how much Israel can afford, as far how anybody can afford to lose people like that. But my question to you, based on that, is if they go in to wipe out Hamas, first of all, is that possible? And secondly, with the world opinion gradually changing against Israel, and a ceasefire becomes possible, all of this is for naught, because Hamas can rise up again. Hezbollah can come in from Lebanon, and God forbid Iran should decide to enter in, and we've got a real conflict. What is going to be done as far as this is concerned in the government, the Israeli government?
The present government, and I'll just say it straight out, is incapable of doing what needs to be done. The vast majority of Israelis today will tell you that. Right, left, center. It cannot be solved in the long term until this government is brought down and another government's put in its place. Because the present government is not capable of doing what needs to be done. What can be done and what will be done is that the army will, if not remove, seriously reduce the threat of Hamas. And it will be done with or without international support. Because we've already reached the point where if we don't do it, all of the region, with all the towns and communities surrounding the Gaza Strip, will stay a deserted no man's land. Think about that. Think about the fact that you're living in your own country, but because you cannot take responsibility or you cannot guarantee the safety of your own citizens, you turn your part of the country, remember, Israel is no bigger than New Jersey, you turn your country, a part of your country, into a no man's land. Not because it should be, but because you're not willing to take the commitment to protect your people in their own area. That whatever it costs, Hamas, if not utterly destroyed, will be so seriously destroyed or so seriously depleted that they will not be able to do what they're doing now. The international community can scream all it wants. The fact that the international community would scream more about that than they would about the Ukraine or the Rohingya or the re-education of the Uyghurs in China just simply says that the international community has lost its moral compass. When that kind of thing happens, again, I come back to what I'm asking all of you. What will prevent the cowardice of the international community, what will prevent the kind of pressure on Israel that would force it into a ceasefire, which is a terrible threat to our normal existence. The only thing that will prevent that is people from every walk of life standing up and saying, we will not accept this anymore. This is unacceptable. And we're saying no. And it means that when you have pro-Palestinian demonstrations where silly kids who don't have the greenest idea of what's really going on, they need to be confronted. This is my sister. This is my daughter. This is my granddaughter. And according to you, justice for Palestine justifies them being murdered or worse. How dare you? It's time to take back the moral high ground.
It's on? Oh, okay. Like that, okay. It's easy being a Monday morning quarterback and pointing fingers, you shoulda, you coulda. Israel, with all its technological know-how, didn't see what was happening under their noses, or they ignored the warnings they received from Egypt and some people who reported it that lived near the Gaza territory. From the beginning, this Israeli IDF spokesperson that's been on CNN and news channels, very impressive looking, tall, big guy, spoke very well. He said when this bomb explosion at Shiva Hospital parking lot turned out, when that occurred and Hamas had already pointed the finger loudly, they were ready, at Israel, the IDF spokesperson said, well, we have information that appears to show that it wasn't Israel, but I can't release that right now. To me, Israel should have better PR all of its life. It should have had better public relations and been proactive. But my question is, thank you, dear. She's the one that got you here today, my daughter, Robin. My question is, why doesn't Israel public relations function more effectively, more proactively? Why did the IDF spokesperson hold back until he got a clearance or whatever? Why isn't Israel more proactive? And now statements made, why aren't they equipped to confront the international community that is so anti-Semitic for the most part and give the facts? What's going on?
I don't have a good answer for that. Again, all I can say is this is a time when we can't sit and wait for somebody else to do what we need to do for ourselves. We need to do for ourselves. So it's needed to push back. On the issue that you raised, I think that this is not just a problem for Israel. It's a problem much, much wider. It's the problem of the terrible pollution of the space of public discourse, where lies, fake news, twisting in all the social media, the fact that social media are not treated as news organizations where they have to separate opinion from fact, where if something is said, it's taken unquestioned without asking is the source reliable or not. That's not just with Israel, that's everything. Why in the world, I'm sorry for being political here, why in the world could a man who has now 91 counts against him and who had national security documents in his bathroom, how in the world could he even think he could run for president? That shows that there's something very, very ill in both social media and in the print and news media. And unless you fix that, you're not going to fix what you just talked about. Actually, what I would say is that the IDF spokesman is the example of what should be done. Because what does he do? He doesn't treat this as a chance to score propaganda points. He doesn't treat this as a chance to show up Hamas. He doesn't treat it as a game. He takes the truth seriously. And since he doesn't have all the facts, he says, it appears such and such, but since I don't have all the facts, I'm not going to jump to conclusions. His way of conducting himself makes me proud, because that's how it should be done. And it should be done that way, not just for Israel, but for every organization and for every country. And you will have the same problem here until this problem is addressed here as well.
Hi. I have a question and a comment. My question regards the desalination plants that I read that we have, or the Palestinians, the Arabs, have in Gaza. And they are complaining without a few, we cannot make them work. Was Israel doing in building this desalination plants in Gaza? That's my question. My comment, I'm already doing what you said. I belong to a social group. My high schoolers, they're all professors, journalists, and they were really coming down on Israel. And I basically start responding the way you said, presenting facts. And my suggestion to the members is don't keep listening to these same channels and newspapers that you read, because they are not good for you.
As I said, I will provide a list of journals and sources of information that provide reliable information that you can use to get the kind of information that you can then use. I will give it to Catherine as a document that will have links, and then you can just pop the links in.
We'll send it in our e-news. We'll make sure that all of the information that was alluded to in this talk will be down in those. So just keep checking your e-news, same way you found out about this talk. Yeah, exactly.
Forgot about the...
Regarding the desalination plants, I actually happened to do a little bit of research on the water issue in Gaza when I was with the Center for Israel Studies. Well, first, it's not Israel's responsibility to build any kind of facilities in Gaza. Israel is not occupying Gaza. It's up to the Gazans, to do it. And the rest of the world that says they need water, go ahead, help them. Okay? That's what I just said. It's okay, it's okay. I said the rest of the world, can help them. The Egyptians can help them. The rest of the world can help them. The problem is that no one is actually running their infrastructure properly. There are about 5,000 or more wells that have been drilled in the Gaza, strip, that are illegal. They've caused seawater, to actually penetrate into their aquifers. And so they contaminated their own water. So it's not, Israel is doing them a favor by providing them water from Israel, into Gaza, and they're trying to bomb the desalination plant, that provides them with water. So I think we need to provide, the real information and the truth.
We have, I think, time for 2 more questions, and then we will carry on the conversation in the social hall over a cup of coffee.
I was wondering, if Hezbollah enters this, do you think Israel will be able to sustain itself?
Yes.
And could you just briefly explain to us why? Because that's a concern that I have.
Certainly, if Hezbollah enters, it would be a much harder war. But we have to remember to keep things in proportion. Israel has the strongest military in the Middle East. Tremendous amounts of planes, tanks, men. It would be a hard fight, but it can be done. We did it once, we can do it again. And if we're given no alternative, if that's the only way we can protect ourselves, we will do it. The other thing I would say, and this is, Israelis feel a deep sense of gratitude to the United States and the leadership of President Biden in so quickly, not just supporting Israel with words, but in deeds, bringing 2 aircraft carriers and 2 battle groups into our region of the country sent a very, very strong message to our enemies that if we're faced with this kind of thing, we're not going to be facing it alone. So those 2 things together give me the confidence to say that whatever the challenges we face, we will be able to overcome them.
So I was, one of the things that I've been involved with in my conversations with friends and social media relations is kind of going back and asking, how is Hamas helping the Gazans? How are the Palestinians, why are the other countries helping? You know, Egypt doesn't want to open the border. You know, and you can, without having to like go down the list of facts and try to convince people, you can just turn it around and just ask them back. How is Hamas helping, how has Hamas ever helped Palestinians? So it's a really easy way to be like, you know, the Jordanians weren't helping, Egypt wasn't helping, Hamas isn't helping. And I found it really interesting that, I think it was, Hamas is more popular in the West Bank than in Gaza, and the Palestinian Authority is more popular in Gaza than in the West Bank. So I thought that was interesting. But I actually would like to know, maybe you know a little bit more about the efforts to provide the Gazans more direct information, more, how do I say this? Kind of truth-telling of like, Hamas is not helping you. Do you want to live in this situation, or do you want a better situation?
So
because there are things you can do.
Israel does that, for example, with sending out leaflets, through radio broadcasts, through things on the internet. We have Arab language broadcasters that do that. Plus the fact the internet is open. The internet, it's not like China. Every Gazan can access the internet. They can access our news services. They do. And so through that, that's certainly a way. The problem is that as long as Hamas controls Gaza, they then intimidate anyone who thinks unlike them, who would dare to criticize them. So how can the Gazans hear something else? And the UN hasn't done much to help by capitulating to the Hamas's insistence on indoctrinating the next generation, as opposed to teaching what should be taught.
Okay, I'm sorry if I missed your hand for questions. We do have the opportunity to carry on conversation in the social hall, and I think this is a good opportunity to thank Professor Gilron. And again, keep in touch, stay in touch with the men's group. We are planning a follow-up meeting in December. The reason is 6 weeks down the road, 7 weeks. And at that point, it's going to be an entirely different landscape than what we're looking at today. So please, let's adjourn to the social hall. And thank you all. Thank you, Professor.